Hello, I'm Ryan Cook, and this is Civic Tech Chat, a podcast about the civic technology movement. We seek to harness the power technology has to improve the delivery of public services to people everywhere. Here we go with another episode of Civic Tech Chat. This week we're joined by Amenity Applewhite, product manager with the City of Austin. We're going to talk with her a bit about three main themes. First, her path and life journey and how that's related to her career progression and the types of skills she's learned. Next, we're going to talk a bit about dealing with professional adversity, both her own personal experience with it, as well as some advice she might have for others. And then last, we're going to talk about her work with the city, modernizing government services, and maybe we'll get to learn some gems from her own work there, trying to get it done with stakeholders and folks on the ground. So with all that said, let's go ahead and go right into the discussion. Amenity, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join us here on Civic Tech Chat. To start us off, could you introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a bit about what you do?
Sure. My name is Amenity Applewhite, and I work for the City of Austin. I've been there a little over 2 years, and I'm product managing the city's new website. It's in alpha right now, so the URL is alpha.austin.gov, but once it's kind of reached a threshold of quality in terms of content and tested interfaces, then that will be the new URL, austin.gov.
Wow, that sounds great. Now, one of the questions that I like to start with after the introduction has to do with personal why. So could you tell us a bit about your personal why and how that drives you each day to do what you do?
For sure. I have been involved in open source software since I was in grad school, and I began using open source GIS software. And then for my thesis was building a CMS with WordPress, and just started to realize what value there was in software that was free, that anybody could use, that there was a community to maintain and support users. So that's been a big driver to me, to be able to work in a place where what's coming out of the organization is something that anyone can use. Then in terms of entering the civic realm, the City of Austin was new to me in that it was an employer, but I had been involved in neighborhood activism for several years, serving on my neighborhood plan contact team, which is basically in charge of kind of reviewing zoning changes and sidewalk construction and demolition permits and all that type of stuff, and then basically going to all the various commissions and trying to advocate for the neighborhood and what's best for it. So I actually really struggled a lot interfacing with the city in a number of ways during that time. And one of the major ones was the website and my inability, everyone's inability to find content, to understand processes that were really important, and really bad forms. So I kind of got to the point, I spent 7 months in my friend's startup and reached a level of complete burnout and thought, maybe this is time for me to have a job at the city where it's illegal for me to work over 40 hours a week and make a difference and fix all the things that have been bothering me. So that's in terms of why am I in government. That's that explanation.
I'm getting the sense from what you're describing there that you might say that you're on a bit of a tour of duty right now in your time with the city. Is that a pretty accurate way to think about it? Sure,
but at the same time, things feel very precarious right now with our organization. But if everything straightens out as it appears that it might, then I could see myself working there, for quite a while. And I also feel like if I weren't working for the City of Austin, I would probably try to stay in civic tech.
Oh, nice. So it sounds like the bug has definitely bit you from this space.
For sure.
I noticed you have a pretty interesting path to where you've gotten now. That's included some roles like designer, developer, instructor, among other things. Would you be willing to share with us a bit about that journey?
Sure. I have been doing graphic design for pretty much since I was 12, both for nonprofits on a volunteer basis and in a paid capacity. I had a computer in my house since I was a little kid before any of my friends had computers. So the combination of being like a built in nerd and also being really interested in visual design kind of set me on that path pretty quickly. By the time I was choosing where to go to college, I decided that I wanted to go into design. I spent 8 months at Parsons School of Design in New York City and realized that I wasn't willing to give up a liberal arts education. And I wanted to be reading books and I wanted to be kind of in a different environment. So I left that. I actually started teaching art, which kind of helped rehabilitate me as from after that experience of like intense work, making, drawing very, structured, making quote unquote art in a very structured way. And so I was working with kids. I learned Spanish, where I got to brush up my high school Spanish quite a bit because the students didn't speak English. And it was really, really wonderful to me. I went to Spain. From there, decided to move to Austin. They have the best Latin American studies program in the United States, and my plan was to start there. But my first semester, I was in a class about was the geography of Latin America, and I read this article called GIS Sistas, and it was about empowering Indigenous women to collect data to use a GPS and collect data on the boundaries of their Indigenous territory, so that those could be recorded in legal maps and help in as the government kind of decided where boundaries were and made those official. And the idea of empowering women in that way and the applicability of these new kind of tools to do that was huge to me. And at the same time, being able to apply design principles in cartography, overlapping with kind of anthropology and geography was really appealing. So I ended up getting my undergraduate in geography, my minor in anthropology, and from there I got a grant from the European Union to get my master's in Spain and Germany. So I did my master's there, and it was on geospatial technology. During that time, as I mentioned before, I was introduced to open source software. I'd been using proprietary GIS software, and I was a little horrified when I saw the open source software that we were using, because it was buggy and it wasn't as robust. But my instructor said, you can learn how to drive in a Ferrari or a beat up old Volkswagen, and you're still learning how to drive. And as we were working with this software, we were able to submit bug reports and provide some internationalization. So it really appealed to me. I ended up doing my thesis on creating a GeoCMS that could be crowdsourced. So a map that promoted artisanal food products in rural Spain. And I got to do exactly what I wanted, a combination of design and research and implementing this system. In implementing it, I just was able to reach out to developers, to these WordPress developers, and they would literally be, in Google Chat. This is before Hangouts and screen sharing, but they'd be showing me how to use the JavaScript console and showing me, some tricks, how to fix my PHP. And it was amazing. And I built this site I was very proud of at the time. It's painful to look at now, extremely dated, definitely down. But it was a great experience. I came back to the United States in the middle of kind of the tech crash in 2009. And it was not easy to get the jobs I was expecting to get, working on Google Maps or working at Stamen Design in San Francisco. And so I kind of just, I was living in Austin. It was a nice place to live. and I decided that I would take a job doing kind of creative assistant is what the title was at a company called Enthought. And they did scientific software consulting, but also is founded by the writers of SciPy and NumPy, which are scientific computing libraries for Python. So immediately went into another open source community that was pretty amazing, was working with really amazing people. And soon the kind of creative assistant job expanded from updating the logo and fixing the homepage of the site to making training materials, illustrating, kind of concepts of how you could make quantitative analysis for financial data more efficient using Python tools and kind of all of these things. It was the best part of my job to sit down with some pretty brilliant people and have them kind of explain a concept, go draw it, have it circle back around with them, get some feedback, redraw. And I had a great time there. I did user interface design. I managed webinars. I planned SciPy, which is a conference for scientific computing, for 2 years. And I decided to move on. I was, again, really burnt out working 70-hour weeks. And I went to the University of Texas to become the webmaster at the School of Architecture. Immediately, my job was to rebuild the site completely. I have a thing about people saying like redesign the website, because I've never actually redesigned a website. It's always rebuilding it, where you're replacing something completely. And that was definitely the case here. It was a site that was built in Flash. All the original files were lost. In order to update the homepage, I would have to go and like decompile this weird Flash syntax and edit it. So meanwhile, I was trying to figure out how to build a new site for the School of Architecture on a very limited budget, and working with a visual designer who didn't necessarily understand mobile design, didn't understand web implementation, but kind of working with them to take their branding that they created, make it into some designs, doing testing with that. And then in the meantime, joining the Drupal community. So there is a great Drupal community in Austin. Really everywhere. And I was also, there was a really strong Drupal user group at UT. So UT had migrated their website to Drupal. And basically with the support of kind of all these various resources and basically, Google and figuring out how to do all these things, I built this website, and I did everything from systems administration to, DevOps, which is pretty simple because I was the only developer, to the front end design and all the user testing. And when it was complete, I kind of felt like my job there was done, and went to the aforementioned startup, which was a great experience, but also not somewhere that I wanted to stay. Ended up at the city, and here I am.
Well, that is quite a journey. And there are a couple of themes that really kind of seem to stick out if you'll entertain a little follow-up. One of them, of course, is like, and you've mentioned this a bit as we've gone along already, this like idea of like empowering others seems to be at the core of like part of what you do. Mm-hmm. And another thing I noticed as you described that is you've had to learn like a very diverse set of different skills that maybe at first glance maybe wouldn't naturally fit together, but you've found a way to like make them into tools for what you're trying to do. You could probably describe like what you've done there as being able to mold yourself like clay with these skills. Could you talk a little bit about that experience? Is that something that is a skill, that learning so it's come naturally to you, or is that something you've had to foster over time?
Sure. I am a generalist. I am a generalist at heart. I am insatiably curious. I ask a lot of questions. Some of them, I know there's theoretically no stupid questions, but some of them, I'm not afraid to ask something very basic, whether I'm talking to a designer or developer. And like I said, it's incredible to have Google and Stack Overflow, all these user communities. So I really have dabbled and made things work and pieced it together, maybe not always as good as a full-time, fully trained designer, developer, researcher. But it's been, it's been great to try all of these things. At the same time, I struggle being a perfectionist with knowing, oh my gosh, there are designers out there that are so much greater than me. I need to go home and spend all my nights and weekends working on my portfolio and creating these perfect things. Or I can kind of hack some JavaScript, but I really, really, really need to know how to write jQuery. And I need to go home and read this big book that I just bought and figure out how to write some applications. And, okay, I'm in user experience now, but I don't know like what to do with all these sticky notes everywhere. And just having to constantly feel like my whole life revolved around kind of coming up to speed to be the best at what I did was really exhausting. So moving into product management felt really natural to me, since a lot of that role is moving in between different disciplines. And so it actually, now what I'm doing is kind of being a hub of communication and helping understand constraints from kind of all of these various disciplines, and then working with stakeholders to foster those relationships, collect their needs. And, I'm writing a lot, I'm talking a lot, and making a lot of decisions and listening to people's reactions to them and reforming them. And it's just, that is what comes naturally to me. So it's kind of a joy to be able to finally take all of that in and feel like I'm really built in to do what I'm doing.
And adjacent to the professional work you've been doing, I also noticed in your background that you've got some nonprofit involvement there as well with a couple of organizations. The first one I'd like to ask you about is that your leadership post in an organization called Girl Develop It. Could you talk to us a bit about that organization, its mission, and what inspired you to get involved?
Yeah, for sure. So Girl Development is a nonprofit organization. It is all over America, and they offer judgment-free, affordable classes for women to learn how to develop and write code. So I actually was introduced to Girl Develop It when I was at the School of Architecture, found this application that was a total security risk, was asked to recreate it for a new semester, and realized I had to scrap all the old code, and I didn't know how to store data and retrieve data from a MySQL database. So I took a class on PHP and MySQL. I think it was like 4 evenings, and it was awesome. I sat around a table with a bunch of women, and we learned how to do it. We had a woman instructor, and it was such a comfortable environment. I had always been around software developers, and they were great software developers, and they were willing to help me, but there was kind of that hesitancy to really feel like I could ask every question I wanted and help the people I was working with. So that was a great atmosphere. I took some more classes with them. I had a lot of opportunity at that time to kind of put into practice what I was doing. And soon they started asking me to TA. So to sit in a class and kind of help the students with things, walk around, and answer questions when they were doing exercises. That was really wonderful. And after that, I became an organizer. So I would set up classes, kind of arrive ahead of time, work with the event host, send surveys to students after the class. And then they invited me to be a chapter leader, and I was really flattered. And I've been doing it for not too long, I think 6 months, maybe a year. But I work with another really awesome woman in town, and we organize classes. I'm kind of in charge of a series of events called Code and Coffee. So those are just us kind of settling down at a coffee shop for a morning and inviting anyone, whatever they're working on, to come and get some code review or get some suggestions. And through all of that, I've never been a great developer, but I can do my HTML and my CSS and my SAS and my basic command line. So it's really awesome to be able to not only teach people that, but show them that they can move up in a technology career without having to always be the best at a specific thing, but to understand it.
Oh, that's fantastic. In particular, I really enjoyed that mention of the Code and Coffee that you organized there at the end as well. I too think that's a great space for folks that are just like seeking to learn in a pressure-free place, which seems like it fits well in with that mission you mentioned for Girl Develop It.
For sure, yeah. And men are totally welcome to attend the classes. And sometimes we have these great male instructors, but they just have to know that they're probably going to be the extreme minority in the room. So as long as they can accept that, then it's open to everyone.
Oh, certainly. Now, the second organization I wanted to ask you about that I noticed in your background there is something that is called the Sims Foundation, which I see you've cited as being your favorite Austin nonprofit. Could you tell us a bit about that one as well?
Yeah, so I mean, Austin is known for being a music town, and the thing that's pretty unfortunate is that musicians often don't make a lot of money. So there are two great organizations in Austin. One of them is called HAM, and they provide health care to musicians, so basic dental care. They get them fancy earplugs, all sorts of things that musicians, a lot of musicians wouldn't go to the dentist if they didn't have a pretty cheap way to do that. So I married a musician, and I found this organization, Sims, too. So they're kind of the equivalent of HAM, but they focus on mental health care and addiction recovery for musicians, which really struck a chord with me. Just, from personal experience, family experience with mental health, and knowing that there's a huge stigma there, but then also realizing that musicians work in bars at night. They're artists, they're sensitive, they're creative, they don't have money, they have these struggles, and they are really susceptible to addiction, and for Austin to be benefiting in like a touristic sense and just kind of in its own branding from the music scene, having a way to support musicians and like literally keep them alive was a mission that really resonated with me. So I've just been volunteering there for a long time. A lot of times it's just going to a music festival, going to ACL, going to we have a million festivals here. So just tabling and letting musicians know that we're out there, and letting people who know musicians know that we're out there. So it's something I really enjoy doing.
Now, before we switch from these life path type questions into some of our main subject material for this episode, I did have a couple questions that were Twitter related for you. So one of them is, I have to ask, like, how psyched are you that you managed to claim one of the very rare first name based Twitter handles?
I'm so psyched. I didn't even really realize the significance when I got it. I'm very often able to claim the first name things. I'm the first name on GitHub. I'm first name, joy of being one of the only amenities in the world.
Nice. And it's definitely smart that you've taken advantage of that. It's pretty cool that you were able to have the nice, like, short and sweet handle.
Yeah, I love it.
Now, related to that, we did some investigative digging here at Civic Tech Chat, and we discovered that your very first tweet on the platform is a question to Jennifer and Adam asking why you signed up. So I need to know, did they ever get back to you?
Well, yeah, they definitely got back to me because Adam was my then boyfriend, then husband shortly after, and Jennifer was one of my best friends, his bandmate. So they had started an account for their band, and, it's pretty funny to look back on now because they're horrible with social media, and I don't think they ever tweeted. But I didn't really know what Twitter was. I kind of felt a little annoyed that I had to join, so they had one more follower. But so that's what's behind that tweet, and could definitely they could answer in person because I was living with them. So
Nice. So a little bit of love and some band music is what got you started on Twitter there.
mm-hmm.
So now I think this is a good time for us to change gears here into some more of like our main content type materials. And one of the things we talked about a bit and we were discussing what we would cover with this episode was this kind of theme of facing adversity. And in our conversations there, you mentioned a bit about having to find out about and then struggle against some pretty considerable institutional sexism along your path. Are you willing to share with us a bit about that experience?
Sure. So I was raised in a household. My dad had this mantra that was like, girls are better. And he would say it all the time. So my sister and I think that we just always assumed that was true. And we went to school and we saw obviously girls were better. We're all smarter. So we went, my sister was is currently one of the only EMTs in the fire department. She was the first one to take the physical fitness test that the men took. So yeah, one of the only female EMTs, I should have said. And she, she's definitely a leader in doing things from high school on, being a firefighter that men usually do. Tech, which I've been doing for a long time, that was a guy thing too, and it never really occurred to me that it was a guy thing. But as I moved up into the tech world, like I said, I mean, I felt so supported by all these people I was working with constantly. At the same time, once I started to realize that they were getting paid like 2-3 times as much as me for work that had equal value to the organization, I started to figure out that I needed to learn how to ask for a raise and just kind of accept the fact that that there were some things, some just kind of built-in salary expectations that I needed to kind of counter and take on myself. And once I started working with Girl Develop It and realizing, my experience was pretty lucky being able to feel comfortable asking questions and talk to people. But a lot of women don't feel that, don't experience that. And then, basically moving forward, coming into the city, I'm currently in a position where I'm paid a lot less than a lot of other men in my realm of work. And, I'm trying to tackle that, but it's just what happens. And then at the same time, you kind of have these, like Susan, I think her name's Susan Foster. She wrote this great microservices book Fowler, her last name is Fowler, that I read last year when I was working on some microservices stuff. And she's the gal that kind of wrote this letter post leaving Uber and called them out on this really horrific chain of events where she was everything from harassed to underpaid, underappreciated, and they basically drove her out of the organization. And then there was that Google email that went around, women are inherently inferior. And so really starting to realize, like, this is even more than just women feeling comfortable or women getting their salaries, but this is like a really big thing that we, us, the people who are already in it and who have progressed, really need to show some leadership and advocate for ourselves so that the women that come after us have it better.
So I think maybe something I'm hearing there is, are you describing, I guess, the thing with pay as perhaps a symptom of a deeper problem that causes that? Am I hearing you
the right way? For sure. And I think that part of that is that engineers are paid much more than, say, design researchers, product managers. They're paid quite a bit. But really, once you understand user-centered design, once you understand the value of team structures that are diverse with many disciplines, you should understand that the contributions to what people are bringing to the team are of equal value. So the fact that women tend to be in content strategy and design research, project management, that's part of it. But I'm saying, like, I know a lot of women engineers who are paid less than their male counterparts. So for sure, it's a symptom, and there's some kind of, factors behind it. But yeah, it's probably the most visible, easily quantifiable way to see this disparity in action.
Hearing you talk about your story, in particular with your experiences with the pay gap there, I hear from you that you've had to put a significant amount of effort in, like, just trying to get that fair pay that you're after. Could you tell us a little bit about, like, how you would approach coming over that difficulty, and maybe from your experiences in that, is there any advice you might give to others out there that are facing these types of struggles?
Oh, it's so funny. I have an email that I'm about to write. That is kind of a response to an email that I received, kind of trying to quell and deny some of my requests based on my last reclassification and my last rezoning, how they counted my years of experience, how they put me into a classification that was lower and lesser than what I was doing then, and definitely than what I'm doing now. And gosh, doing it in government. When I was at a startup, I just went in to the HR guy and said I'd like a raise. He came back and said, I'm so excited. I'm going to give you a 3% raise. That's more than we give people normally in their first 6 months. And I said, no, I want like a raise, like a big raise. And it was so hard for me to do that, but it like took 10 minutes. This has taken me so much time, and the pace, the glacial pace of government HR, and then just the convoluted processes, the people that you have to interact with who are like, I mean, honestly, in my case, like very unkind, and then also dealing honestly with like a lot of men in upper management, who come up with excuses why you shouldn't be paid what you deserve. And yeah, it's a struggle. But what I'm doing is I'm basically, my solution to everything is make a spreadsheet. So I've kind of broken up all of their classifications point by point into, what is this responsibility and role? How am I fulfilling it currently? What are my, breaking down my resume and showing that I have, that actually doing data analysis and, maps when I was an undergraduate should count as technical experience, which I was told it didn't. And using these and giving them to my coworkers who are also, I mean, we have some major problems right now. The two lowest paid members of our team are African American, and the lowest being the African American woman, and really trying to make sure that they, as I'm working to advocate for myself, that everything that I'm doing I can share with them. And I mean, it's hugely important to me right now. It's an interesting question for you to ask, like, right at this moment.
Yeah, it does sound like the timing is a bit uncanny there, but perhaps hopefully folks out there in the audience will get to learn a bit from what you're doing there, and perhaps like your move there of immediately going to the spreadsheet will prove to be fruitful.
Yeah, and I should mention that there are some like woke people in the city that understand these old job descriptions and the pay scales are just not realistic. We're not going to be able to get the quality of people we need with technology, as important as it is in delivering government services. We're not going to be able to do that if we don't offer some higher pay and also rewrite our job descriptions so that they're not like I'm right now I'm business systems analyst. I'm trying to be a business systems analyst senior, and it's generic enough. I can fit myself into it, but we should really be asking applicants for some modern skills. So there's definitely an effort ongoing to get these new job descriptions in there, to get the pay scales that would relate to them. But and this is going to probably come as no surprise to the listeners of this podcast, it is a really slow process. So, we're just trying to find a stopgap solution at this point.
Now, you made mention of the idea of the descriptions that get written for these positions.
Mm-hmm.
I would be interested to know that in your view, does maybe the manner that practice is gone about, does it contribute perhaps to like the gap in that experience you see between like what would be fair pay and what wouldn't be, just because of the manner in which these descriptions are written and the type of person that would attract?
Oh, yeah. I mean, for sure. So if you want to work at the city of Austin right now, and I imagine this is not unique to us, you have to be willing to kind of decode a lot of weird job descriptions and like an awful job application process, and kind of fit yourself into these buckets that don't really describe what you do. The interview process is completely painful. I was lucky, but it does involve like a panel of people asking the exact same questions, going around the circle, right, filling in forms, and honestly, in some ways, that's wonderful because it ensures that all the applicants are treated equitably. There's some benefits to that, but you have to, like I said, you have to really want to do this. And then you look at that kind of like, this is the salary range. And to hit submit on that application, knowing this is the salary range, you have to really want to do it. So in terms of I hate to say quality, but just the type of person that we have working in technology right now, it's definitely not as high as it could be, and it's hard for us to recruit. So two of my coworkers, Marnie Wilhite and Ben Guin, they presented at Summit, and they had a talk that was called "Why Would Anybody Want to Work Here?" And it was just kind of like, given all of these given all these hurdles, how are we going to create a culture where applicants can see our enthusiasm and the kind of environment that we're creating and join us despite all of this? But it's a huge effort.
Part of what you talked about there was this phrase that I heard, like fitting yourself into buckets. And that made me think a bit about a conversation we had as we were, again, preparing for this episode. And you mentioned having feelings of imposter syndrome creep up a bit as you've gone through your path. And I think that's something that a lot of folks in our audience can relate to a bit. What has your experience like been trying to get through those moments? And what would you tell folks out there that are feeling similar things?
Yeah, I mean, it's always worse when I start a job because I tend to, look at the job application, fit myself into the bucket, but there's a little bit of finagling there. I kind of say, oh yeah, I mean, I did this once. So I have lots of experience in this. And then you get into the job and you're like, oh shit, I have to learn a lot of stuff. So those first few months, I'm always kind of struggling and kind of going home feeling like, nobody understands how unprepared I am to do this, and I need to learn a lot. But then as you go, you kind of realize that you are not the stupid person in the room, that everybody's kind of learning as they go. And when you start to ask questions to people, you realize that your questions are not, they might not know the answer. You sit down with an engineer and you say, I don't understand why this code isn't working. And they're kind of poking around at it for as long as you've been poking around at it, and you end up Googling it together and solving the problem that way. So just seeing that pattern happen over and over again, is just kind of the thing I pull up in my mind when I feel like I'm not good enough, is just say, okay, like just think about every time you have these thoughts, you find out it's not real. So, you kind of have to just talk yourself through those internal dialogues.
Hmm. I guess perhaps maybe the lesson I'm hearing from you there is none of us really know exactly what we're doing. It's not just you. Would that be a pretty accurate way to describe that?
Yep. I mean, the technology changes so quickly. Being a strong technologist involves not being arrogant, being humble, being willing to let go of choices that you've made, being willing to ask questions, being willing to try new things. And when you're constantly trying new things, you're not going to know everything like from the outset. So yeah, I would say the best people I work with, we don't know what we're doing all the time.
Nice. I really like that answer there. I think folks are going to really relate to what you've said about this, and perhaps be a little better off for it, learning from that experience as well. Now, these things we've talked about here in your experience kind of facing that adversity in city government, one thing I noticed talking about that is that seems to relate kind of very strongly with perhaps things you would need to then do work to help like modernize services delivery. Like you would need that tough armor, as it were, to engage in that work. So I'd like to go ahead and shift gears here to talk a bit about your work for the city of Austin in that realm. So in that, in your work with the city, what would you say has been the most significant challenge that you faced as you've worked to improve services delivery?
Uh, I mean, it's a hard question because there are so many challenges, things that I found really useful and things that I perceived as challenges until, I kind of learned how to deal with them was just kind of change resistance overall from the people on the ground. People being afraid that they weren't going to understand a new system, that they weren't going to have a job anymore. So really working with employees to show them that my goal is to make their work easier, that I want them to be delivering their very valuable services to residents in a way where it's easier for them, more enjoyable for them, as well as the resident. So that's an aspect of it, is those personal relationships with the people that you really need to be learning from and working with. But I think one of the harder ones is kind of just from like the kind of manager director levels up, getting them to understand. Again, like most of them aren't technologists, they're definitely not up to date on agile projects and user-centered design. So getting them to understand the value of what you're doing, getting them to understand the value of user design, that like this might seem like it's an expense you don't understand. It's not really generating a piece of software as it goes, but the testing that you're doing ahead of time to make sure that you're actually going to build the thing that users need is really important and is going to save you money in the long run. So in terms of the website, which is the product that I'm working on right now, the idea that we were not going to go in a room, sit for a year, 6 months, and build a new website, and then all of a sudden austintexas.gov was going to switch off, and that morning austin.gov was going to switch on. That instead we are going to launch an alpha site. We are going to be testing. It was going to be obviously kind of a work in progress. It was going to have bugs. It was going to, maybe look a little different every day. We would stand that up in parallel to the other site. We would work with departments to not migrate their content, but like completely change their content. And that there was going to be no automatic switch that was turned, or that was really hard to get people to understand and embrace. Luckily, there were several other cities that had kind of successfully done that and ended up with really, spectacular sites. So Boston.gov started with pilot.boston.gov. I think there was beta.phila.gov for Philadelphia. Mass.gov had one, Indy.gov. So being able to show our stakeholders, like literally just put a slide on the wall and say like, oh, this is their website when they launched it. It had 3 things on it and was, 6 pages. And this is their website now. And that same site has been up the whole time. And once it had the substantial amount of content that it needed, the other site was just, quietly turned off. Really helped us. But that would be my hurdle, I guess.
That makes a lot of sense, for sure. Now, in the notes that you sent me to make sure I would be a prepared host, you made a distinction between challenges with like what one would assume would come with like the on the ground type folks, and those that come from stakeholders. And I had kind of like a little bit of like a qualitative statement about that relationship. Could you talk to us a bit about that?
Yeah, you can develop trust, you can develop a relationship with the staff that's working in the department if you approach it the right way. And I'm not saying always 100% of the time, but sometimes like a really, really important relationship where they're telling you all these things, you need to know that when you're going in to talk to a staff member, you're not going to show them everything that's new. You're not going to solve their problem without listening to them, because they've been there for a while and they probably know what the solution is, and they just haven't been empowered to implement it. So you need to, from the outset, be showing them a lot of respect and listening a lot. And I just, I have not encountered situations where that isn't easy to do, because you're really working on the same thing on a regular basis. Then once it gets up to these higher levels, there's, the personalities are very different, the concerns are very different. There's a lot of politics around who owns this, who's accountable for failure, who should be lauded when there's success. These kind of more meta level of interest. And that's a lot harder to address in a real genuine way. You have to put on your strategic kind of political face and tell people what they want to hear, or very, very gently convince them that you know what you're doing. Protect your teammates from their constant scrutiny, and it's a much different kind of work to be doing.
So on prior episodes, this idea of employee experience has come up as either a positive or negative influence on retention. Has this concept come up for you in either your personal experience or the experiences of those of your colleagues? And if so, like what commentary would you be willing to share with us on its importance?
Yeah, for sure. I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier when I talked about recruiting and people really having to want to be working for the city right now in order for us to get them on board. But the city of Austin is actually ranked as one of the top 10 employers by like Fortune magazine or Forbes, or I don't know which one it was, but it's this hilarious list. It's like, Apple, Google, Costco, City of Austin, Whole Foods. It's pretty crazy. But the city does have really great benefits. The city of Austin has a pension, then we get free PE classes. So I take free yoga classes. We get rewards for biking. I mean, it's a really great place to work in that sense. Unfortunately, most of the people on my team were brought into the city as temporary employees under a fellowship program. So they don't have benefits. They can start getting health benefits after a year, but they don't have any way to get paid leave, which is really important if say you want to have a child and you need maternity leave to be able to continue in that job, or someone gets sick and you need to be able to leave work. for a period of time. So that has created an atmosphere on our team of a lot of discomfort, a lot of instability, and we've had a lot of attrition lately, just because the it not being available, these full-time positions that our team needs. And again, very, very slow process of getting these employees into full-time positions. But I think it's a pretty common situation that technologists, designers, researchers are brought into the city on a consulting basis. So I imagine that going back to that kind of transforming HR and transforming hiring and job descriptions, making sure that there are full-time job descriptions with security and full range of benefits is a big part of it. And then in terms of just like the office, so it's great. It's great to work in an office with windows. It's great to work in an office with with fun people where you can stick stuff on the walls and wheel around whiteboards instead of cubicles. There's a lot of employees at the city that end up in cubicles, but when we bring prospective applicants into our office and they see we're having fun and we like where we're working, that makes an impact too.
Oh, it definitely sounds like it. So I guess then to that end, this is kind of, I guess, a related question, perhaps. If you had a magic wand and you could change one thing, be it about the employee experience they were talking about, or how services are delivered in the city, or really kind of anything in between there, what would you use that magic wand to change?
Oh, gosh. Okay. So in my ideal world, any resident in Austin, regardless of what language they spoke, regardless of their legal status, regardless of the device that they're using, would be able to access all of the city services that they need remotely. So they shouldn't have to go into an office. They shouldn't have to take off from work. They shouldn't have to take a bus and find childcare. They shouldn't have to figure out how to understand a web page that's not in their language. They shouldn't have to eat up their data plan loading websites that are not performant. They shouldn't have to get someone to read them a website because it's not ADA accessible. If everyone, that's kind of my dream. If I could have a magic wand, I would be out of a job, but that would still be a wonderful situation.
Nice. And in many ways, a lot of areas, be it in design or technology, I guess, like if you were able to accomplish all your aims, would be all about working yourself out of a job. So I guess that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, that seems like that'd be a great situation for folks to be in, for sure.
Yep. That's the dream.
Now we've spent a bit of
there's another part of that too. That's, do everything that we're doing open source and transparently, and even with research, creating templates for testing, creating templates for designing, and then being able to share that code and that documentation with other cities who might not have the resources to have a team like ours. That's a huge part of it. So then you go from the residents in Austin have access to all these services to the residents in rural America have access to all these services. And so that's the extension of it.
So I think that's an excellent segue into the next question I have for you. So we've spent a bit of time talking about your experiences working on trying to get to that magic wand situation. What advice might you give to folks who are, say, in their own towns or cities and they want to do similar work and they're just getting started out?
Reach out, look at who is doing what you need to do, because the truth is that other cities, other government organizations, from the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau to the federal level organizations, we are all struggling with the same things. I think that going to the Code for America Summit is a great way to connect and realize that, but just have the guts to go find the person you need to talk to who's responsible for making the thing that you admire and you want, and whether it's a digital form or, you know, a homepage that helps people navigate to the services they need. Just make friends and help people and ask for help.
Nice. So it sounds like at the core of it, that relationship building task kind of can act as your foundation as you go forward. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah, for sure. So not only are you learning concrete things, or, you know, finding the right piece of code to use for what you're doing, but you're also really revitalized, having these relationships where you can vent to each other, encourage each other, give each other advice.
Now, another thing that I like to do on the program when we start to get to our conclusion is to give the guests some time to kind of leave us with the concluding thoughts of their choice. So in that spirit, are there any concluding thoughts you want to make sure the audience is left with here?
Oh gosh, was this on your question sheet?
Oh, yes, the very bottom. I snuck it in there.
Okay. Concluding thoughts, brilliant thoughts. What we're doing is really important, and I think that we all know that it's the civic tech movement is really, really young, or as we see it now. So everybody knows the story of kind of healthcare.gov turning into its success via this kind of tactical, scrappy approach, and that kind of spreading pretty quickly, if you think about it, through government. But just know that there's a lot of work to be done, but we are doing it really fast, and we are bringing other people on board that need to be part of this. So stay hopeful. I love the Code for America, you know, the stickers and the slogan, like, no one is coming, it's up to us.
Nice. I'm a big fan of that one as well. In fact, I always have that either on a laptop or a tablet wherever I go.
It's on the back of my laptop right now.
Oh, nice. And I really enjoyed hearing that conclusion from you as well. I think the sentiment you're expressing is definitely a great thing to leave us with. So again, Amenity, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join us. I know we've gotten to learn quite a bit, both from your personal and professional experiences, as well as your work to try to bring modern services to the city of Austin there.
Great. Yeah, it was wonderful conversation. Thanks for inviting me.
You can follow us on Twitter using the handle @CivicTechChat, visit us on the web at civictech.chat, or subscribe to us for content updates wherever it is you download your podcasts.